To the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission. Denise Junius, would you please call people to call the meeting? Well, give a roll call.
Yes. This meeting will be broadcast live on CTN Cable 16, AT&T Channel 99, and online at a2gov.org/CTN. Public commentary can be made in person or by calling 877-853-5247 or 888-788-0099. Enter meeting ID 996-9403-7874. Commissioner Cass? Absent. Commissioner Meadows?
Present.
Vice Chair Garber?
Here.
Councilmember Song?
Here.
Councilmember Ghazi Edwin?
Here.
Commissioner Pesmeyer will be late. Commissioner Bond?
Here.
Chair Stambach?
Here.
Commissioner Cowan is absent. Commissioner Winkler?
Here.
Commissioner Sova?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Denise. Let us look over the agenda. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve the agenda.
I second.
Discussion. Any changes? All in favor?
Aye.
I see no one's opposed. First thing on our agenda is something we promised last time. We have a lot of new members, and we wanted everybody to introduce themselves. So,
Oh,
well, yes, are there any public comments? Reading?
no.
Okay. Thank you. Aiden, would you mind beginning with just some words about yourself so that we have idea of what kind of resources are sitting around the room with us?
Sure, absolutely. My name is Aiden Sova. I am a recent graduate of the University of Michigan, class of 2021. I currently work at Google as a product consultant. You don't have to know what that means. It's a lot of boring stuff. Recently, I was elected to the Ann Arbor District Library Board of Trustees, which I'm very excited and thrilled to be swearing in soon on the 23rd. Additionally, as well, I'm a member of the Emerging Leaders Council. I'm the leaders of the Legal Services Corporation. Additionally to that, of course, the Human Rights Commissioner, as well as a bunch of other things that we can talk about later. But I'd be more than happy to share any of my other professional experiences as they are helpful. And additionally, I'm a grad student at the University of Pennsylvania.
Linda?
Linda Winkler. I've been on the Human Rights Commission this is my 5th term. I have a background in law and mediation.
Brandon, I know you introduced yourself before, but I hate to leave you out as the only commissioner not speaking. So.
I'm my best. Hi, my name is Brandon Bond. I am also a recent graduate of the University of Michigan. Did my undergrad there, graduated in 2020, and then recently graduated with my master's in public health and social work this past December. And I guess like interest-wise, I am kind of wide-ranging from advocacy to wellness to, of course, human rights. Fortunately, to be on this commission with everyone else. And I guess, like, aside from that, I am accepted a new job at the University of Michigan to be a mental health and well-being student advocate in the LSA Dean's office. So I'll be working on different programs and policies to promote mental health and well-being for students in the overall college and university. And aside from that, I am also on one of the committees for Garrett Space, which is a mental health nonprofit that is geared towards supporting young adults and supporting them with just their own mental health and well-being. So yeah, happy to be here and provide different insight into public health, social work, and everything else that I have experience with.
Thank you. My name is Leslie Stambaugh, and I've been the chair for a while, and I don't even know how long. I went to undergrad and grad and had took all political science as much as I could. Graduated. My first job was with a bunch of very smart people in organizational development. They were organizational psychologists. And I was there at the Institute for Social Research for 14 years as a senior research associate, and I did a lot of research about organizations and how they worked and what would make them better. And after that, I did even more years consulting with Rensis Lickard Associates and then consulting in my own company. With a specialty on, I got very interested in diversity when there were a lot of Japanese transplants in Michigan. And so I was very interested in diversity and how it could drive productivity and employee satisfaction. I think that's it. Judah?
Take off my mask, paradoxically. So, Judah Garber. I came to Ann Arbor in 1980 for law school, and more or less have been here ever since, with a few other years spent elsewhere. Spent most of my career as working for the front of the court, the domestic relations arm of the court in another county and in Washtenaw County. As a hearing officer or mediator, various different roles. I was the director for the last 20 or so years at Washtenaw. Also, I was labor relations. I was a union representative for 15 years, and then on the other side of the table for the other as an administrator, and retired from that position fortuitously right before COVID hit, and I've been on this commission right around that same time, right when I think my first meeting was the first meeting that didn't happen live because of COVID. So, anyway.
Bad timing, huh?
Yeah.
Pam?
I'm Pam Meadows, and I have been on the commission. This will be my 10th year. I present with a little over 20 years in human resources. Previously worked for the states of Ohio and Nebraska in civil rights, and actually had my own company that I registered with the state of Michigan. It's called RAID. It stands for Rally Against Individual Discrimination. And have worked in several disciplines in human resources, and then have successfully defended the companies that I worked for that sustained civil rights complaints, one of which resulted in the Ohio Civil Rights Commission saying, you need to come work for us. So I did. I am native to Ann Arbor, probably the only one on the commission who is, born and raised here, so know a whole lot about the city of Ann Arbor, and it has evolved over time. And it's my pleasure to serve on this commission.
Thank you. Now, we have already heard from the two council liaisons, but we have not heard from Denise. And Denise is somebody, I should have told you this before, shouldn't I? I thought about it, but I forgot. Denise is the person who ties us all together, and if you call the Human Rights Commission, Denise is the person you'll talk to first, and maybe only, so you're very important.
Oh, thank you. I'm Denise Janess. I am the staff liaison for the Human Rights Commission, the Independent Police Oversight Commission, and the Commission on Disability Issues. I'm glad to serve.
We're glad to have you. Minutes for the December 14th meeting. We have a motion to start considering that.
I'm so moved that we review the minutes, or that we accept the minutes.
Thank you. Yes.
Second.
Discussion. Any changes anybody would like to see in the minutes?
It's not so much a change as it may be just a clarification. I saw, I think, I should have noted this, but it's where MDOT is mentioned. Yes. So it's on page 2 under follow-up on outside work, and it's the paragraph beginning with Councilmember A.G. Edwin reported the city council is looking into a study about MDOT. That really should be either all caps, because it's an acronym for Michigan Department of Transportation, and that's the only thing that I noted needed correcting.
And no period?
It should either be all caps, MDOT.
Yeah,
There should not be a period after the capital
yeah.
M.
And probably not a space. I mean,
Right.
It's all one word?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll make that change.
Thank you. Anything else? All in favor of accepting them?
I was just going to say, on that same paragraph, as I'm reading it, I think there's an and missing between cost and weather. Just a little tiny thing.
Say that again, Linda?
In that same paragraph, council voted to do a study to see how much the project would cost and whether the city.
Okay.
Thanks.
And after cost? Okay.
Okay. Any other things? All in favor of accepting these minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one. Thank you. Now we would like to hear about some outside work, especially city council. Lynn, Aisha, anything that we ought to know about what's going on in city council?
We just met this past Monday, a pretty short meeting just to start off the year. Nothing was pulled from the consent agenda, which is mostly contracts. The city's just trying to get make some progress in our capital improvement plan, acquiring some easements, assessments. We did vote and approve on the PROS plan, which is the parks, basically the parks and PAC, the Parks Commission have been working on for quite some time, and it's an evaluation of current park use and future park needs, future capital needs for parks. It's a pretty lengthy document. I think it's like over 50 pages. Is that right, Aisha?
Yeah, it's huge.
It's pretty intense and
Yeah.
evaluates use, each individual park. It's the PROS plan. What is it? It stands for, I would, if anyone has any free time and is very curious on how we use our parks and how, it's interesting to see how, despite our parks millage that we had a couple of years ago, the capital needs are pretty intense. But our parks are used pretty, you can see there was some discussion on center of the city. So if you remember in 2018, the city had passed a charter amendment on the library lot, and trying to figure out like how we can be in line with that charter amendment, and also recognize some kind of ongoing concerns around what the group who had advocated for that had promised, which was fundraising and giving us some kind of idea of what they would like on that site. The city has staffing and ongoing support for that. But that was kind of the biggest thing that we had approved on Monday, unless I'm missing
Nothing with
anything else.
direct human rights coming.
Well, there's,
No.
yeah, I think there's a few things that are human rights, I mean, they are. So one of them is they brought forward a snow removal feasibility study, so directing the city to see how much it would cost to do citywide snow removal. And that's been something that the disability community, the Disability Commission has really been asking for. And in talks about bringing it forward, I did notice some language in the, do you guys know about the A2 Snow Match program? So there's a existing program that helps private residents.
Oh, yes.
Who cannot do it themselves or afford to do it themselves with snow removal on their private property by matching them up to a volunteer. And the criteria language previously, up until, I guess, this week, used to say you have to have a physical disability. And so I talked to the city administrator and said, let's say something more like self-identify with any type of disability, right, not just physical. So they're working on changing that language. And then I'm continuing work on creating this ADA coordinator, which is going to be, it's actually going to be called an accessibility coordinator, who will work under Laura Orta, who's the Director of Organizational Equity. And we have been learning through meeting with the Office of Disability Affairs in Detroit and with experts on this, how critical it is for us to develop a disability just kind of framework across all city departments and commissions. One of the things that has come up is how we really need to be careful as complaints come in of making sure that when complaints about discrimination for having a disability come in, it comes to us. When complaints around accessibility.
When you say it comes to us, you mean who's us?
Comes up because we're the Human Rights
Oh, okay.
Commission, right? And it's discrimination. But then
About
accessibility,
disability.
right.
Okay.
And then accessibility complaints go to CODA.
Well, I've got a question. Wasn't there supposed to be a American for Disabilities Act person hired?
That's what I'm talking about. It's gonna be called an accessibility coordinator.
I see.
And I'm helping to create that job description. And they will most likely also work, not directly, but probably also work with us in some way. There's gonna be some overlap.
Uh-huh. But they will handle complaints.
They'll
I
handle
assume.
complaints around, CODI will handle complaints around discrimination experienced because one has a disability.
Okay.
But if someone has an access complaint, like this park isn't accessible or whatnot. So I'm sorry, discrimination complaints come to us, access complaints go to them.
Kodak, yes.
Does that make sense?
Okay, yes, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
that's.
Thanks. But we don't have that coordinator on board yet, is that what
No,
you're saying?
we have plans to hire them in July.
Okay.
June, July. And the description will be posted at the end of March. And so I'm meeting with Laura Orta, and we're just continually creating the job description and meeting with others in different cities who have done this. But what's become clear is that there is an infrastructure that needs to be built around equity and disability justice throughout the city, which is where we should have some part in.
Okay.
I'll add one more thing, if that's okay. So it looks like the county has announced that they're hosting a Housing and Equity Summit for the 31st. There's a registration link, and I can share that over email. It's an all-day event. It looks like it's 8:30 to 4, and it's being hosted by the Office of Racial Equity. And I'm encouraging commissioners, if you can attend some of it. The agenda hasn't been published yet or finalized, but I did chat with Jennifer Hall, our Housing Commissioner, about this, as well as Aubrey Patino over at Avalon and Amanda Carlo at WHA. And I'd like to see a lot of community members come out. From what I see, it's being co-hosted by the County of Office of Economic Development, Michigan Medicine, WCC, and the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation. So it would be great to actually have commissioners from a couple entities, Renters Commission here, 'cause, I think housing is a human right, and HHSAB. So if we can get folks to come, it'd be really interesting to see this. There hasn't been a summit like this, I don't believe, and they're trying to make it a regional effort versus kind of like a municipality or just dependent on a service provider, because WHA had hosted a breakfast on housing and homelessness last month. And Abdul El Sayed was the keynote speaker on that. So he connected public health concerns and housing as a human right and homelessness, those themes together. But what OECD wants to do is kind of make it a more general service providers community event, like a full conversation on housing and equity.
If you get it, will you send me a copy and I will distribute it?
Yep, sure. I can
Thank
send
you.
the flyer and the registration link. Oh, and the vice president's coming tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right. That's
That's a big deal.
That's
What is
kind of
that?
big
What-
news.
Where
It is
is,
big deal.
I mean, is that going to be a public thing?
I don't, yeah.
We were not invited, just so you know.
Yeah.
Well, there's potential. I mean, we could always ask her to come back because, I mean, I think we do some extraordinary work in Ann Arbor, the progressive work. So,
Yeah.
let's find a reason to bring her back, right?
Yeah.
And other federal officials.
Thanks, and that is why, by the way, we are not having the city administrator at this meeting. We tried to schedule, but he was busy for some reason.
Right.
Oh, because of
That
the
took priority.
VP.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay. Follow-up on other ongoing work. Linda, do you have something to say about complaints?
As far as I know, we received one complaint this month, and it had to do with fair chance access to housing,
Yeah.
and that is.
When you say this month, you mean in January so far, or
Uh,
December?
When did it come in, Denise? It might have been the end of December.
Yes, it was the end of December.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually have a question related to that. You remember how last meeting we talked about how there needs to be some clarification around the fair chance housing language? About Ann Arbor's landlord to a property in Ann Arbor as
Yes.
opposed to Ann Arbor.
Yes.
What is the status of that? Do you know? if
That
that's-
status, we just finalized the language, and it's going to printing.
That's great.
or
That's
our
really great. And if you could share it with us too.
I will, as soon as
that
we
would be
get
great.
it.
Okay, thank you.
I think it'll be much more.
Clearer, yeah.
Much clearer. We found a number of places where Linda, once again, was correct in complaining that we didn't have all our act together about complaints, and I'm going to call a meeting of the lead people on complaints to just to go over some of the new things that are going on and make sure that we have our numbering system right and our intake system working more efficiently. I mean, yeah.
And also, I hope that some of the newer people who want to be involved in that process, we can, you know how we were trying to stagger the people who were handling complaints as they came in, so it wasn't always the same 4 people who were getting the complaints. It would be nice to, have some kind of meeting where we can share with the newer people how we do the investigations, what the process is like, and do a buddy system and for a few of them so they can learn what we do.
We had a system at the end of the retreat last year, or whenever it was. We had a system that sounded really very good but didn't work. And I think when we have that meeting, let's try to, I'm assuming, Aiden, you said you were interested at one point?
Yeah, I was going to say, feel
Yeah.
welcome to put Brandon and I together. I feel
Brandon
like with
also?
his natural onboarding as well, it'd be a good opportunity.
Well, we ought to talk about how to do this more efficiently. Complaints come in, so they all come in at once, or they don't come in for a month, and it's hard. And they're all different, and sometimes they suggest a certain background, certain experience level, or, or whatever. And so it's hard to equally distribute the work, but we're going to try again, okay? So we'll be back with that. Anything more about complaints? Trespass. Linda, you want to talk about next steps?
Yeah,
where
we're
we are?
we're just a little further along than we were last month. So this is a new trespass notice form that we've been working with the police and the city attorney's office on for quite a while. We've been through several police chiefs over this, and we finally have a new form that went to communications and came back to us, and we made just some slight revisions. We've now sent it back to the police, who I think will be sending it to communications, who will be running it by the city attorney's office, and hopefully when it's done, we will have a much more user-friendly form in which the property owners who are requesting that somebody be removed from their property can now request that they be removed for a period of time that is less than a year. It used to be, if you were requesting somebody not come back, it had to be for a year. That was the default, because that was the maximum amount allowed under law, and that's what Ann Arbor always did. Now they will be able to say, you can't come back for 30 days, can't come back for 60 days. There'll be an end date, and so, we're hoping that will be helpful to everybody. And we have also made the appeals process more clear on the form. It's in bold letters, it's easy to understand. So hopefully, we're making progress. And once that's done, the police policies and procedures on implementing and educating the officers on how to use the new form will have to be revised.
I'm excited to have that done, but that's a big thing and very interesting thing. I think we're going to have a lot easier time, and I think it will also be impacted eventually by unarmed response. So things will be better for people in Ann Arbor, I hope, as a result. I assume we'll report back when we get the final form and the policy changes and whatever. Excellent. I know this is out of order, but we're waiting for somebody to come, and maybe two people, because we also expected that Keita would come for the discussion
here.
on. She is here?
Yes. She's in Zoom. You ready?
Oh. Well, maybe we should still wait and deal with the unarmed response part first, and then deal with Washington ID card, which is Keita, but I think that Sarah would like to vote on it, and she has a change she'd like to make. But it still might not work. She might still be late. Would you mind if I reverse the order? Okay. Let's do that. There are three public forums scheduled about unarmed response. Aiden, Brandon, Pam, and I attended the first one, and I thought it would be helpful just to have some thoughts on it, on a public response.
Sure. I was hugely inspired and impressed by the turnout. It was this Monday at 1 p.m., and my math is always incorrect, but approximately 50 or so people came out to the Ann Arbor District Library downtown location in order to participate, which we thought was just exceptional. Anecdotally, of course, just from the people who did speak up, people were hugely supportive. It wasn't a question of if or why we should do this. It was a enthusiastic, yes, we should do this. Here are additional considerations for our respective communities that we would like to see included in something like this. Personally, I voiced my sort of thoughts about the associated logistics of how would one get in touch with our crisis or our unarmed crisis response team in terms of would it be 911, would it be any sort of other number or means of contact. Personally for me, my thought process was that there should be multiple venues, whether that be a text service, whether that be 911 helping assist in connecting such a team. I think that that's something that needs to be fleshed out. But thankfully we do have the consulting agency and some very wonderful people on that. But I will say, by and large, it seemed resoundingly positive. And I was glad that the interest was there, at least in that room. And I've already heard forecasting for the next events. The other events will be similarly large as well, which is great to hear. And additionally as well, I know that we have meetings with the Human Rights Commission, with the consulting agency as well. The first one kicks off this Friday. Bright and early, too. Thank you for being amenable to my schedule, everyone.
That's your fault.
Absolutely. But yes, I was very heartened to see the response and eager to continue involvement.
Thank you. Brandon, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I would say like I don't have too much more to add. You did an amazing summary as always. I will say that there was I just feel like ample opportunity to express concerns or opportunities for improvement as well. So I think some of the main things that came up from I guess like my memory or recognition or notes. One was just getting input from the public safety team or police officers as well, and kind of seeing like what their influence will be on this in terms of having that teamwork, or just like who's in charge of what. Another big thing that kind of came up was kind of different perspectives in terms of how the, I guess like workforce would navigate it. So the business field, like they wanted more so the city to run things, whereas more of the community members wanted the nonprofit side to run things. So there were some, and I feel like in a way unclear as to like some of the motivations behind that overall. But I think as any project will go, there's always going to be more questions, more things to learn about. But I think overall it's moving in the right direction. And hopefully, yeah, anyone that is listening, they stay involved and the outreach to community members continues on. So it's just really important that these forums aren't the end of this communication and that, yeah, we just continue to stay informed and voice our opinions at our meetings and everything. But yeah, I think that for the most part kind of wraps up some of my thoughts on the forum. But yeah, super happy that I went.
Thank you. Pam?
So I was pleasantly surprised to learn a lot of what they had conducted up to this point. It's a work in progress. They anticipate being able to wrap it up and present the results to the city. They said soonest February, more than likely sometime in March. And I echo the sentiments of my colleagues Aiden and Brandon as to what they observed, and I observed those too. I had some reservations prior to going to this meeting that I just shared briefly with Leslie because of the way that it kind of came about, specifically the fact that we were not involved in that initial selection process, and we have shared our comments about how we feel we should be, not either should have been, should be, and can, going forward, be allowed to participate in that because we have a lot of information that we believe would be beneficial to a company that is out of Lansing. They were selected by the city, and they, I guess in some respects, it can be a double-edged sword. Either they, because they have no personal involvement with the city, then there's the potential for there not being bias. But the flip side of that is they may be ignorant to the specifics that are unique to us being the city of Ann Arbor, and what works well or should work well for the benefit of us all. So the concern that I had was, what, if anything, did they do to try and get the word out and get the information out, and how did they reach out to the community to involve them in this endeavor so that when they produce their report, it's a nice, I don't know, I'm at a loss for words here. It's representative of the majority of those individuals that are here or may be impacted by being in a situation where they sustain some harm. So as the result of attending the meeting, I learned a lot of what they have done up to this point, where they are now, and what it is they anticipate doing going forward. I actually took a snapshot of the various organizations that they've reached out to that was listed in their presentation, and these are community organizations. There was a listing of 26 separate community organizations that they have reached out to thus far to try and elicit the information that they believe will be helpful in producing the report based on the RFP that the city has engaged them to do. So it will be interesting to see what that ultimate result is and or will be. I would strongly encourage everyone to participate in at least one of the public forums because it gives you direct knowledge as to whom it is that this organization is, what they come with, what they anticipate doing. I understand that they were given specifics by the city of what to do. But outside of that, the ultimate objective is to assist us towards success in addressing this particular subject matter, unarmed response. And with that, one of the things that I took away from that particular session that I attended is that was shared by a couple of the participants. There didn't appear to be a lot of either effort or individuals contacted who have been on the receiving end of being unarmed. That I don't know what their methodology is or their efforts or what it is that they anticipate doing to try and contact those individuals, but their voice needs to be heard, and that needs to be incorporated in the report that they ultimately produce. The other piece of it was, at that point anyway, and maybe they will pursue this going forward, is that they had not contacted and gotten the response from the police, who are oftentimes the individuals called to address an unarmed individual and what that response looks like. But those are two absolute critical pieces that must be inclusive in this report. And so we strongly urge the organization to ensure that that is, in fact, incorporated. And so those are the things that I took away from that meeting, and I look forward to being in the meeting on Friday, the Zoom meeting, where I can specifically address those things directly to the individuals and hopefully encourage them to incorporate that in their report.
Right. Well, I think you all gave interesting observations, and I agreed with all of them. I was very impressed with the speakers people who got up and talked about incidents where armed response would be needed or would be better than what they'd gotten. And people who feel very passionately about how important this is. I also understand what you're saying, and I have a lot of those concerns as well. And what Brandon said, I think, was very important. They did a lot on the survey with multiple choice, and they didn't ask why they chose one versus another. And because people don't know very much and don't have good models for what unarmed response is, there aren't that many in the country, so most people don't know, and there was no explanation in the materials at all. Just saying, I want 911, or I want 711, or I think this reason for armed response is important versus this reason or this reason. Just having those numbers is misleading, because people don't really know we don't know what they mean. We need to know what they mean. And I'm concerned about who was responding. 85% of the respondents on the survey were white, and only about 4% were Asian, so we've really not very balanced given our population profile. And there are also questions. There was one question that just stood out in my mind, and that is that the article that I read in the Ann Arbor News said that there were 600 respondents, people who responded. They said there were 1,500. So, I mean, that's quite a difference. I'm wondering how that happened. Anyway, we will find out on Friday. And I agree with you that lots of people should turn out. The more people who are interested and involved, the better this will be, and we really want it to be good. I think everybody really wants this to be good. So it's important. And now we're here on,
Leslie, you have a hand.
oh,
So,
Sorry.
City Administrator Milton Mahoney had created a memo back to City Council back in October, and answering some of the questions that you have here, in particular in how the focus should be in engaging people who will most benefit and will be served by this program. The number between 600 to 1,500 might be because there was a number of survey participants, which differs from their one-on-one interviews. So there are survey participants, and then the consultants have also had one-on-one interviews and small group discussions. As far as asking for, figuring out how to outreach folks to do the outreach, which is what the task at hand is. So the consultants are specifically just community engagement, outreach, and collecting all the information, presenting it back to council. They are not actually formulating the program. So they're collecting information and feedback so that city staff can kind of get their arms around what an RFP might look like. So we're further away from the process of actually rolling out this program than we might think. So I don't think we should, folks should have the assumption that this is a one and done conversation with the consultants. It's just the first step in collecting, I guess, the temperature of the community and our community's priorities, and then formulating the RFP and asking the provider of the organization that will implement the program. And even then, there'll be room for, changes and adjustments. It could be for a number of reasons, depending on who applies for the RFP, what kind of resources, if those resources that we've already budgeted are enough, if we need to revisit it, or like if we need additional partnerships, beyond the city. Because there are also potential state funding that can come down to help us with this too. But one example I wanted to give from Milton Administrator Dohoney's memo back in October is that besides the one-on-one interviews and the public survey, they've had a PDF copy of the survey provided to all social service agencies. So the paper copies have been distributed at the clerk's office, city council meetings, housing commission, and the library. So as far as I know, it's not just the town hall meetings that they're working on. They're working on a variety of ways of
But
trying to
this
do
was the
that.
survey data that they were flashing on the screen. I think.
Right, but what I'm saying is that it's more than just the survey data. They've had one-on-one discussions, and it's outlined in Administrator Dohoney's memo, so I can also share that too. It was part of council's agenda back in October, and it was in response to some of the concerns that ICPOC had raised, which are similar to here. So I'll share that.
My concern is that numbers sound like they're really important, and they're not always if they don't represent what you think they represent.
Right.
So it's just,
Yeah, I guess there's no real reason why they would inflate numbers. They're not incented to.
I'm thinking numbers like they chose A and B rather than C and D. And when they don't know what A, B, C, and D really mean, it's hard to know. It sounds like people know, but they don't necessarily, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, we can take it up with the city administrator and ask that they change their
We will.
survey process.
You know,
Yeah.
I do think that when I took the survey, there was some brief explanation of, we are thinking of forming X to help people who are in the X, Y, and Z situation. I mean, I'm not saying that maybe that was adequate information, so people really understand what does unarmed crisis response mean. I don't even think they called it that. It was more, we're thinking about creating a group that will not be armed, that comes in response to people in this situation. Because I understand your point, that if people had more background about different models, but there's also, in conducting surveys, kind of the more information like that you put in the beginning, it can dissuade people from even taking it. But I think this is something at least to bring up with them and ask them, what did you choose to include to explain what this is in the survey and why?
When I took the survey, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and you felt that it was inadequate.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because we're asking questions like what did you say? Should it be, how should it be funded? What the phone number should be, who should be in charge of it? You know, some questions that they had no way of.
Because I think part of it is kind of, I guess like when we are meeting with them, I think one of the things that we can try to get more information on is some of like the focus groups and interviews that they did to kind of get some of that qualitative information, or like understanding more of what persuaded people or like what their thought process was. Because I think that's kind of where I'm like hearing this conversation going, is just saying that it should go, we should call 911 or 211. Okay, but why should we call those? What makes that more comfortable for you and everything? I think that is the part that seems to be like lacking, and that wasn't in the presentation as much. It was just, here's the number for how many people voted for this or the percentage, but why is that the route that this percent of people want to go to? That part was missing. So I think that, when we meet with them, that's just something that we can dive further into, of just understanding more of that rationale from the series of people that they connected with.
Anything else on that? Let's talk about the amendment that we are proposing now for the non-discrimination ordinance. This is an amendment that would protect people who do not have a state or federal ID card, and instead use one that is locally provided by, and we have one very good one that is locally offered by Washtenaw County. We have a resolution, and is Keita on board now?
Yes. Commissioner Conlon, can you unmute yourself?
Keita wrote a resolution that included the, hello, where are you?
Hi.
Oh, there she is, okay. We said we have your picture and everything. Keita, this was a very helpful resolution. You've included the wording of the amendment that Margie has drawn up, and to my knowledge, you've got at least 3 changes that people had suggested that are not in this. Do you have more, or is there?
Yes, I received a late suggestion for change, and I appreciate that one because she caught, I'm not sure who sent it, but whoever did, thank you, because one of the whereas clauses should have been moved to another location. And I think it will make more sense relocated. So I don't know how you want me to go through the changes that I've made that people can't see in front of them. How would you like me to do that?
Just the changes that we have not already seen. Because
Okay.
people have seen the ones that you sent the other day. So what changes need to
Okay.
be made now?
All right, so let us go to, I will count down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the 7th, whereas clause.
Yes.
All right, that clause, part of it will be merged with the clause before it,
Okay.
so that some of those lists of fundamental services will be added to the 6th clause. But some of those fundamental services will appear in a new clause that will now be, hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Do you see the clause that begins, whereas local government issued ID cards fulfill the regulatory purpose of all U.S. government issued
Yes.
ID card?
Yes.
And, all right, well, the first change is that there should be a number 2 that says meet identification requirements.
Wait a
That
minute.
one failed.
You've lost me, maybe. You lost
Okay,
other
well,
people?
it says, whereas local government-issued ID cards fulfill the regulatory purpose of all U.S. government-issued ID cards, and
the second page.
Oh, it's the second
whereas.
The second whereas, okay. Oh, I see what you're saying.
there should be a number 1, which says, meet the federal government requirement to prove identity for I-9 employment eligibility. There should also be a number 2 that says, meet identification requirements under local liquor control code.
Meet
That one, it
identity
was missing in the number 2, so I've inserted that,
requirements.
and I've removed the S from that meet. So now there will be 4 subclauses
I
there.
see. And it just says meet identification requirements. Is that correct?
So
Okay.
that'll be, yes, and that'll be number 2,
Okay.
that whole thing. Then there's the number 3, that stays unchanged, and number 4
The number
now.
3 is what was number 2.
Exactly.
Okay, I got it.
All right, what's really different is that now there is a new clause under that will read as follows. Whereas a number of healthcare providers, restaurants, banks, and other entities persist in refusing service to qualified individuals, despite the fact that they prove their identity with a valid government-issued ID card as requested, and
Did you get that? Okay. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Okay, and that's a new one,
that's a new one.
okay?
You see, then it makes more sense, then we go into the fact that historically, Ann Arbor resolved an analogous problem where affordable housing was being denied,
Okay,
right? Because even though people had a verified ability to pay, landlords refused to rent to them. So the previous draft didn't spell out that, yes, we still have a problem despite these local government-issued ID cards.
okay. Are people comfortable with what we've got so far? Okay. Okay, we've got 2 changes. There was something you said,
And those are,
so it's 6 and 7?
I'm sorry?
And then there's another one on the first page, is that correct? Another change?
No, just the changes that I just went through. Those are the
Okay.
only changes
Okay.
that you have not seen yet.
You started talking
then-
about, yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah. Then, I'm not, okay, yeah, so on the second page, 1, 2, 3, 4. The 4th whereas clause, missing, and then from the 3rd sentence, is the word income after low and moderate. You see, it says, your version would say to low and moderate residents, and that should read low and moderate income residents. That got left out. Do you see that?
Ah. Wait a minute, I've got low and moderate income individuals. Already. Where does it start with? It's not this one.
Yeah, right here.
Okay, so-
Right there. The
Oh.
word income should be right there between moderate and resident.
I see.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
All right, that's what
Is that it?
yes.
You said originally that there was something on the first page, on the 6th and 7th whereas, that you were going to combine them?
Combining 7 with 6.
Yes,
Exactly.
okay. And you just put it in one whereas. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
We had one other recommendation that I know of from Aisha. And that was, you want to mention it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's entirely necessary, Kita, but when you sent it to me last night, it would be on page, just a
The
minute.
last page?
I think it's the last.
Third one from the end?
Oh, that's right. So under 4, on the last page, so it starts out with, "No person shall discriminate against individuals," and I added, "No person or institution shall discriminate
Sure.
against individuals." Because it may not always be like a person, right?
Although it was written by the city attorney, and
Yeah.
I think she is.
Probably
she is
using-
acting under the belief that a legal person is.
Oh, that's right.
Is an entity or person.
Yeah,
right.
So-
yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, that does make sense.
I was just going to say, I think, Kita, the same email you received that suggested combining those two whereas clause that Sarah sent you had another suggestion in it. I didn't know if you wanted to
Oh.
reply to that. It was
Can you
just about
remind,
clarifying the statistics on, undocumented versus non-visa holding people. She's not here to speak for
yes.
herself, so I'm just asking.
oh, okay, well, I had, I'm glad you raised that, because I didn't make that change in my mind, because I eliminated the local statistics that had been there, because, not the local numbers, because they were speculative, they're regionally speculative. Since the studies were only national, and Judah had pointed that out. I am comfortable simply removing that last clause that I think was confusing, where I added, "and of course, 100% of our neighbors who lack visa status." I think that can just be removed.
Okay, thanks, yeah.
Unless people want a special clause that just addresses folks without documentation or visa status.
Can you clarify something for me then? Does the Washington, can somebody who is undocumented get the Washington ID card?
Yes, people, and that's why I guess I use the expression visa status. Most
Yeah.
folks are here because their visa has expired predominantly. That phrase, documentation, undocumented, gets confusing when you're talking about proving who you are, because folks that may not have a federal permission to reside here often have even more documentation of their identity and time of birth and place of birth than folks with permission to be here. So it just got confusing. So we began to talk about folks without visa status, but that may be a term of art and just be too confusing. But yes, any resident of Washtenaw County, regardless of status, regardless of homeless status, immigration status, is eligible to receive a county ID card as a resident of the county who can meet the qualifications and prove their identity and their date of birth and their residency. You have to produce 300 points of proof. And if you can meet that, then yes, it is not about proving your relationship to the federal government. That's the way I can put it. Or your housing status. It's very difficult for homeless folks to prove that they are residents of Michigan because of the type of proof that the state asks for.
Well, that's also an
we-
important point. I wonder if we should, if it is, if you strike it, there will be nothing about undocumented people in this resolution. I don't know if that's
I-
necessary, but it is a point.
I guess I would say, the idea was to try to talk about the range of marginalized communities affected. So if it's too confusing to have the number of neighbors who lack visa status attached to that paragraph, then I'll have to think through what else to do, because I wouldn't want that to just be a standalone sentence, you know? And I don't want to isolate any particular group.
We're planning on voting on this, to accept this today.
Then I
We
would
need
say
to have
let's
a
then
final piece to
then
vote on.
delete, then I would say, we could move, rather than delete it, we could move it, because I think what's confusing is that the first sentence says, whereas multiple studies show that an estimated 11% of all American citizens lack ID, right? I could begin with a broader sentence that multiple studies show that a disproportionate number of residents, American residents of the United States, are from marginalized communities. And then talk about the fact that there's an estimated 11% of all American citizens. That's over 12 million citizens. We are looking at 100% of folks without visa status, which is another 12 million individuals. We could look at it that way.
It's up to you folks. It's an important piece.
So,
My turn.
well, Sarah's here now, so maybe she
Oh.
can speak to her own
Sarah?
point.
Yeah.
And-
Didn't see you coming in.
Hi. Sorry, hopefully Leslie let you all know that I was going to be a little late
Yes.
today. Thanks for your understanding. Kita, great resolution. I just, because the topic sentence was about citizens, and then we had the piece about undocumented folks at the end of the paragraph, that was a little confusing for me. So I think if we want to include that, then we can just say, there are 12 million American citizens, disproportionately X, Y, and Z groups, and then additionally, there are 12 million undocumented people who face these same challenges. And then I think that's a simple change that we can.
So, and you weren't here for the first part of what Keita was saying. Do you have an objection to the use of the term lacking visa status, or do you prefer the term undocumented?
I just thought we should be consistent. I'm more familiar with the term undocumented, so when it said lacking visa status, I wasn't sure exactly what that meant, and I think, is undocumented elsewhere in the document, in the resolution, or, no, okay.
No.
So if it's consistent, I just, lacking visa status, I wasn't sure exactly what that referred to, yeah.
And Keita, I don't know if you want to repeat, you had earlier explained what you're thinking behind that phraseology.
Because folks that are described colloquially as undocumented, it's actually a misnomer, tend to have an enormous amount of documentation regarding their identity and date of birth and proof of birth and location and residency. We've shifted language to, at least when we're talking about the issuance of ID cards, to visa status, because they're not undocumented in that way, in the way of, we want proof of identity and residency. And so from that perspective, people aren't undocumented.
I see,
There are
yeah.
communities that lack, the
People
communities
just,
that lack
yeah,
documentation.
that makes a lot of sense to me. I think people may just not be familiar with that term. For me, being unfamiliar with the term, maybe like immigrants who lack visa status, or I don't know, because like not everyone needs to have a visa, right? Like I'm a little confused about the term, so I don't know.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
When I first heard lax visa status, I thought about like people who are working here and they let their visas lapse, right? Who are immigrants who've gone through the system. I think because we're even having such a detailed conversation about it, I think we should include the word undocumented, because that is what a lot of, I mean, mainstream, that's what they see as someone who didn't go through the immigration system. And if there's someone like that out there reading this, I don't want you know what I mean? I want it to be clear that you can get an ID and you'll be protected here if you have an ID from discrimination. I mean, as an immigrant who went through the system, I immediately thought someone who let their like work visa lapse or something.
Well, then I would say, let me draft a new paragraph that really contextualizes the folks whose status does not impact their ability or right to get an ID card. Because I think that's where we're moving to. Our concern is to make sure people know that whatever your status is, you can get a card, whether it's, your homeless status, your transgender status, your immigration status, none of it matters here. So let me move that, those concepts, and I'll insert that paragraph directly under, that clause directly underneath.
Yeah, and if I can just add that when I read that section, to me, I thought of the dreamers in our community who self-identify as undocumented and as dreamers who never had a visa status and came here with their parents.
Yeah.
So those and who I engage with and trying to figure out a way for them to stay here without, and also telling them that it's not a priority for our police to work with ICE. So that's who I thought of. So I'm glad that folks on our commission here can kind of directly point to, examples in our community when we talk about undocumented immigrant or in visa status. So thank you for
now
thinking more deeply about it.
The community has communicated to me that when we use the word undocumented, they would rather we say the expression members of the undocumented community. So not immigrants, but members of the undocumented community is then the request.
Okay. Okay, so you're going to put in a separate clause for the, and
In a clause that follows, and that clause will express the sentiment that everyone who is a resident and who is able to prove their identity and residency, regardless of, and then I will list all of the statuses that are prohibited in other locations that are not bars to an ID card here.
okay. Do you feel that we have enough that we can vote on this, even though we're going to trust Keita with that clause?
I make a motion that we adopt the resolution as amended with the subsequent paragraph that Keita will draft along the lines that she just said, and that we approve that resolution.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Unanimously here. Thank you very much.
Thank
Keita,
you,
thank you very
Keita.
much for a very good resolution.
No, and thank everybody for your feedback. It was very helpful. I feel like we've improved it vastly.
I have to add, as just a personal note as well, this is just tremendous. Obviously, a lot of research, as well as just hours went into this, and it's very clear that this is more than adequately sourced, not just from personal anecdotal experiences that you've had with the community, but also with your numbers and statistics, and I think that this is exceptional. So thank you, Keita.
Thank you, Aiden.
Okay.
Can I ask something? Lynn, do we want to, no, I can't ask. Oh, I was like, really, I can't? Okay, so do we, I think that both Councilmember Song and myself would be happy to bring this forward to council.
Oh, I hope so.
So, yeah, we want to help support this and get this passed.
And you suggested also that we ask for endorsement by the county commissioners.
It was a suggestion, I was thinking about it, especially because you serve on the Washtenaw County Task Force. I mean, I don't see this having a problem passing, but just saying that, task force, county commissioners endorse it. What do you think, Lynn? Or Commissioner, or I'm sorry, Councilmember Song. It's been a long day.
I think it would be great to challenge the county to be, I mean, we've been great partners with the county on a number of initiatives. So, yeah, the past year when it comes to, labor, being supportive of labor, being supportive of fair wages in the past. So this should align, I think, with their with their mission. We can ask.
Yeah.
We can definitely ask our fellow electeds.
And I will send this to the county.
Would you all want a vote of the full county board of commissioners, or is the county ID task force, which entity are you,
Commissioners, I think.
The commissioners, I think, are up to the task, but especially now that Justin's the new
Yeah.
chair.
Yeah.
do we know in terms of time frame when you had hoped to take this to a vote before city council?
Soon as
And
I-
I can try to coordinate that with the county board of commissioners agenda and calendar?
Well, what I was going to do is send this as soon as I got it from you, the final one.
No, please, no. Because I work so closely with all the the county commissioners, really, several of them still remain, who helped write this whole thing. I would want to go to them and send it to them and say, this is what city council is looking for, and have them put them in touch with our counselors and find out if they want to meet, if they want to ask questions, if there's any more information that they need to take back, and then the 3 or 4 of them will meet in committee. I mean, this is sort of how the county board of commissioners work. That's why I was concerned about the calendar.
Yeah, I would echo that as a former county employee. It's a wonderful board, and I'm sure they would approve it ultimately, but I wouldn't want to delay this by another month or two in the time it would take for them to meet, convene, discuss, and approve.
Well, can we send this to the city council then without their approval, but tell them that we are doing that?
Sure, we can challenge the county, go first and challenge the county. So we have another meeting this month. I probably won't make it in time for the second meeting in January, but we can see if we can put it on the agenda in February.
Is that okay?
Do we have a sense of how many votes we might have? Do we know what kind of support we've got in city council?
Well, you and Aisha had announced it.
I've been keeping council updated, and I haven't gotten anyone reaching out to me saying, I'm concerned, or we want more info. It pretty much seems as if council's in agreement that this is a necessary protection for equity in our community, and I haven't heard any,
Okay.
dissent or otherwise.
Great.
Okay. So our time schedule is that you will come back to us with a final product?
I will come back with a final product, and I will be able to call you, not tomorrow, the next day, after I reach the 3 or 4 commissioners, and just to let them know, and then you can communicate to city council that they have it before them.
Okay.
But I will get you the final draft tomorrow morning. My morning. Which is a low morning.
Yes, your morning. Okay. think, are we at the end? Let's see.
Yeah.
I've lost mine already. Oh, Pam. It's now time for our 2023 elections.
So the floor is now open for us to, I believe per our ordinance, to select our chair for the year and our vice chair. I will let you know that I have received the names for both of those openings, but in the interest of fairness and full transparency, we will also open it up for anyone who would like to nominate either themselves or someone else for either the chair or the vice chair. I will tell you that I have received the following names for the position of chair and vice chair. The name of Leslie Stambaugh has been nominated for chair, and the name of Judah Garba has been nominated for vice chair. At this time, the floor is open for anyone who would like to nominate either themselves or someone else. All right, seeing and hearing none, we will now close that nomination, and we will invite you now to vote on the names that have been presented in this order. First, the name of Leslie Stambaugh for chair. It is not a secret ballot because we want to ensure that we're transparent. So we're going to ask that those who are present, if you would so indicate by saying aye, if you are comfortable and confident that our incumbent and also up for nomination, Chair Leslie Stambaugh would continue in that role as chair. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, the motion carries. Leslie Stambaugh is our chair, once again, for the Human Rights Commission. We'll continue on with the nomination of the name of Judah Garba for vice chair. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any who are opposed? The motion carries. We again have Judah Garba, who is the incumbent and will continue to serve as the vice chair for the Human Rights Commission for 2023. Thank you both.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you all.
We have time for commissioner communications. This isn't always used, but I'm trying to put it out there so people could say whatever they want about maybe coming events, maybe something, comment about the meeting, whatever they want. Any commissioner communications? Tried. Can we have a motion to adjourn then?
Oh, sorry, can I just, so one thing I was chatting with Leslie about is to start trying to, I was going to take on as a project to start trying to do some research around like local protections for trans rights, since that's heavily under attack nationally. So Leslie gave me a couple names of folks to get in contact with who might have useful thoughts about kind of what are best practices and possibilities for protecting trans rights at the local level. But if any of you have expertise in that area or want to join me in that project or have contacts who would have useful information for us, I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in it, so happy to help.
I'm also interested in joining.
Awesome.
Judah,
Thank you.
Brandon,
As am I.
and Judah. So what I'm going to do in the next meetings is I'm going to just ask you for a brief update. Is that all right? That's what we do with ongoing projects. So, thank you, guys. This is going to be exciting. Okay.
And also, now that the resolution is just about finished, there was a email I saw regarding the HRC doing some research around legal representation, housing representation. I'd like to join that committee also as it forms.
Okay. I don't know what it is yet, but we will be talking to Lynn about it next meeting, right? Anything else? Judah?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourned. I get to do this again.
Thanks, Rita. Have a great